First, could everybody check in? Who are we missing? We got everybody here. Oh, I thought I did. Okay. All right, I'm showing 5 members present. First item on the agenda is approval of the prior minutes to the prior meeting. Could I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Had a motion and a second. Are there any discussion, any questions? If not, I'll call for a vote. Roberta, I think.
It's still saying voting?
Yeah.
Did somebody grab the wrong voting?
No. It did not.
And I'm showing Ms. Scott.
Okay,
I think somebody's got the wrong device. Ms. Scott, I suspect you have Mrs. Hartage's device, but I could be wrong. There we go. All right.
I'll check mine. It's still saying confirming.
All right. Everyone's voted. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of an access control system, RFP P49262, Jacqueline Coggin, Project Manager for the Capital Programs Committee.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you.
I'm Jackie Colgan, and I am here representing police on the access control system. Good morning, Chairman Pont and Mr. Parker and members of the committee. The access control system, I'm here to request to solicit proposals as an RFP. Next slide, please. The access control system, just a little bit of background. This system actually secures the access by using proximity cards. That is the little badge with your picture on it. The cards allow the entry and exit for authorized personnel only. The MARTA Police Protective Specialists validate a photo on the access control workstation for each person attempting entry. And the workstation just is a little computer with the photo that's attached to your badge, and they cross-reference it with the person that's actually walking in. The access control is the foremost system for securing MARTA facilities while ensuring the safety of all personnel. The existing access control system that we have now today is Secure 800-8000. It has exceeded its projected useful life and is no longer supported by the manufacturer. We do have increasing failure rates with a longer restoration time. And we have had third-party review studies that solidified the requirements to move forward. Next slide, please. So the competitive solicitation, we're requesting the board approval to solicit proposals with the intent to make an award. The solicitation package will include the following items for each proponent. We have the access control system, that is the software and the hardware for the servers and the backup servers. We will potentially replace all hardware in the field depending on the outcome of the RFP if we get there. We're asking for installation services, an annual maintenance service agreement for the software portion, 3-year plan included in the base pricing is what we're requesting, and an additional 2 one-year renewal options. Next slide, please. So we have seven different phases that we would like to move forward with this request. The first phase is the immediate request to replace the access control system itself. And then future requirements are 2 through 7, the select locations and facilities that are not currently on the access control system. Next slide, please. So here's the money. So fiscal year 22, asking for $1 million, and then phasing through 2 and 7 at $1.5 million. And these are just projected costs with a total, running total of $10 million for the entire project. Next slide. That's all I have. Again, I am requesting for approval to solicit for proposals. Any questions?
Could I get a
I'll move
motion?
approval.
Okay. Motion by Dewart. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Roberta. Yes. Okay. Questions, please? No questions? I do have one.
Yes, sir.
How does this approximate cost relate to the prior contract that could be totally different? I'm just curious.
So the cost, we have to actually replace hardware because the current system is older and only works on older software. So we will have to replace the equipment in the field and the servers.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Ms.
Question.
Oh, there's another
Carmen.
question.
Oh, go ahead. Is that
Thank
Mr.
you,
Law?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to, I think in slide 2, when you mentioned the police protective specialist,
Yes, ma'am.
is that different than the police?
No, that's just their official name. They're the ones responsible for monitoring the access control.
Thank you.
Yes. They are with MARTA Police Department.
But let me just clarify, they are not post-certified, they are not sworn police officers. They are civilians like the folks at the front desk when you walk into the MARTA headquarters are the protective specialists. They are part of the MARTA Police Department, but not sworn officers.
Good point. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I will call the vote. Could everyone go ahead and vote, please? Okay. I see everyone has voted yes. The motion and the agenda item passes. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the execution of an encroachment agreement with owners of 715 West Whitehall Street Southwest for the improvements encroaching on the West End MARTA station, MARTA parcel D4177, Fulton County, Georgia. Robin Boyd.
Good morning, Chairman Pond, Mr. Parker, members of the committee. If you can go back one slide, are you able to go back one slide? Okay. So if you can see, if this is at our West End station, the station is to the west of the property, the subject property. And if you could go to the next slide. So 715 West Whitehall, somebody is buying that property, and they realized when they were doing their title search that there was an encroachment, their building encroached on MARTA property. And the orange is the encroachment, but at the very widest part, it's 9 feet, and then it gets smaller, it's smaller up and down, above and below that. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Our station is over 8 acres, and the property next door is just over 1 acre with about a 73,000 square foot, like an old warehouse building on there. And the improvements were built in the 1930s, so they've been there over 80 years. And to do the encroachment agreement, the way we would, writing it, it would go in perpetuity as long as nothing changed on the footprint of that building. If they made any changes, the encroachment would go away. And what they intend to, the new buyers intend to keep that building as is to use for retail and commercial downstairs, and then they would like to build affordable housing above that. And we had it valued, the value of the encroachment. It's $21,900 that would come to MARTA. There is FTA interest in the West End station, so FTA concurrence will be, we will get that before we do any agreement. And if you could go to the next slide. So I'm asking for authorization to execute an encroachment agreement with 715 West Whitehall Street. Are there any questions?
I'll
Thank
move
you, Mr.
approval.
Okay, we had approval by, motion by Dewar, a second by Ash. Any questions from Ms. Boyd?
Hi, I have a question. When you say they will build affordable housing above, is the entire resident to be affordable housing or percent?
I don't know that answer. But I can find out that answer.
Thank you. I would like to know that.
I will do that. I'll do that and follow up with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I have a question.
go ahead.
So, the property that's at 715 West Whitehall, they're going to develop that, is my understanding?
Yes.
So, is there any conversation of how they're going to access the MARTA station from that end?
I have not had that conversation with
okay.
them, but I will find that out also,
Yeah.
and I'll follow up.
I'm just curious because if you got this encroachment issue that's going on, then they can't do any modification. I'm just trying to figure out how they're going to get from that side if the West End station in Busset Bay is here to the MARTA station.
Right.
I
The
mean,
only thing they can't modify, they cannot change the footprint of the building. If they do that, the encroachment goes away.
All right, okay, so that will remain no matter what happens?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But I'll find that out, and I'll follow up with everyone.
Okay.
Any other questions from Ms. Boyd? If not, we'll call the question. Could you please vote?
I don't think I'm logged in.
Okay. All right. For the record, showing Ash, yes.
Can you do a hand vote?
I think just add, Mr. Ash has said he voted yes. So.
That works.
Okay, let's go to the next item. That's, Robin, you up again. It's a resolution authorizing the sale of MARTA fee interest in Main Street at the intersection of Main Street and Oxford Avenue, MARTA parcel D4182 in the city of College Park for the redevelopment of 3907 Main Street, Fulton County. Robin Boyd.
All right, so this property is to the west of our College Park station. This used to be an enterprise rental company, and they moved across the street and are selling the property. So if you could go to the next slide. If you could go to the next slide with, there we go. So you can see the property at Oxford Avenue. MARTA owns a sliver that, first of all, we own the, where the driveway entrance into the property, and then a portion of the curb and grass in the right-of-way for Main Street. We acquired that back when the College Park station was built, and it was for the realignment of Main Street. So if you could go to the next slide. Again, we own that frontage. The property is selling, and the new owners would like to, I think they're going to tear down that building or at least build another building. And they want to have a restaurant and something fronting the road where they would have bike racks and chairs and people could sit out there. So they also want to change the curb cut and the driveway. And so they requested that if MARTA would sell it. So MARTA, if we receive permission, would sell the fee interest to College Park, and then College Park would have that for the redevelopment of the property. And the appraised value for this is $22,600. It would be a permanent sale. It would be sold in fee, and it was purchased with local funds, so there, no FTA concurrence is required. And the next slide, please. And again, I'm asking for authorization for MARTA to sell this property in fee interest to the city of College Park.
Okay.
Move
Can I-
approval.
Who was that? Stewart, motion for.
Second, right.
Second for Ryerson.
Ryerson.
All right, questions for Ms. Boyd? That was easy.
Thank you.
Okay. Call the question. Could everyone please vote? And I see Mr. Ash is probably locked out, so we'll take a manual vote from him. Okay. Resolution passes. The last item is just, are there any other matters to come before this committee? If not, we'll close the meeting and take a short break and start with the next meeting, committee meeting.
You got to press to speak.
If we can call the meeting to order, operations and safety.
I'm logged in.
Very good. Yay. If everyone will go ahead and sign in and show attendance. Logged in, sign in. Okay. Everyone signed in? Thank you. First order of business is approval of the June 24, 2021 Operations and Safety Committee meetings.
Move approval.
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Let us vote, please. Thank you. Next agenda item is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of inspection and maintenance of generator services authority-wide, B46991. Mr. Sean Thomas, Director of Facilities. Mr. Thomas?
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I'd like to welcome everyone back. Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair, Mr. Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, members of the Operations and Safety Committee. Now, I direct your attention to agenda item number 1, and this is a resolution requesting authorization to award contract IFB 46991, and this is for the inspection and repair of generator equipment. This solicitation was previously presented to this committee in April of this year. However, at that time, the recommendation was to award to the parent low bidder, Signal Point Solutions, who has since rescinded their bid. Subsequently, I stand before you today with a new recommendation for award. Next slide. The objective of this solicitation is to ensure compliance with fire and life safety regulations for emergency power equipment, and also to continuously improve upon the state of good repair that the authority has taken thus far. Next slide. So as an overview, I'm going to give a few topics related to regulatory compliance. I'm going to discuss the overview of the equipment, our previous efforts for state of good repair. I'm going to give a bid timeline to be followed by the award analysis and a recommendation. Next slide. So with regards to compliance, one of the first items is NFPA 110, which is the Fire Protection Agency's recommendations for remaining compliant with this type of equipment. One of the other requirements is the EPA requirement that applies to stationary engines, as well as the EPD compliance for fuel storage related to leaks and spills of petroleum products, and various other regulations that apply to the different municipalities that we operate in. Next slide. So with regards to the equipment, this equipment, we have approximately 30 plus stationary units that support critical operation functions, such as emergency egress lighting during power outages, backup power for fire protection systems, our CNG fueling systems and CNG detection systems as well, as unleaded and diesel fueling systems, and various communication systems throughout the authority. Next slide. So with regards to the state of good repair, most of the emergency power systems have been upgraded in the past 5 years. We've replaced approximately 20 of those units through the applicable capital improvement projects. We've also integrated this equipment into the building automation system, and that kind of gives us real-time data as far as run times, power loss, fuel levels, as well as a virtual engine dashboard, so we can keep an eye on this critical equipment at all times. Next slide. So with regards to the bid timeline, so during the period of October to January, we held the advertisement, the bid evaluation, and which led to a responsibility determination. And that was followed by, during the next phase from February to April, which led to our first recommendation and the bid since being rescinded from the original recommended party. Finally, here today with the second recommendation for Yancey Power Solutions. Next slide. So Yancey Power Solutions submitted a bid for $371,327, and this is for a 2-year base with 3 1-year options. They also, we established 18% DBE goal. This vendor exceeded that goal, and they committed to 24%. Next slide. So even with the modest price increase, pricing is considered to be fair and reasonable based on historic data, the preliminary cost estimates, as well as the range of competitive pricing. So in closing, we've discussed the objective of this solicitation, key points that justify the necessity of the program. Those key points are regulatory compliance, support of the authority's investment, as well as the operational impacts to equipment failure. In addition, we also discussed the pricing being considered as fair and reasonable based on preliminary cost estimates, the range of competitive pricing. It should also be noted that the recommended awardee, Yancey, is the longest standing manufacturer representative of the Caterpillar brand of generators, which is the brand of emergency power equipment installed at our facility since 2016. In conclusion, I hereby request authorization to award IFB 46991 to Yancey Power Solutions for the inspection and repair of generators throughout the authority. Thank you.
I'll move approval, and I'd like to ask a question when the time is appropriate.
Thank you. May I get a second?
This is Hardage, I'll second.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have questions from the committee. Mr. Ash, please go ahead.
Mr. Thomas, thank you very much for the presentation. Can you tell us how the DBE goal is going to be satisfied?
As far as which,
My understanding is that it's an 18% goal and they've made a 24% commitment.
yes, sir.
My question is, what are they doing to get to that 24%?
So in the past, some of these vendors have utilized, as far as purchasing the materials and supplies that they use to maintain equipment. I'm sorry. Turn it over.
They've acquired a DBE to actually do the preventive maintenance inspections for this contract.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? I see two hands. I don't know who was first. Let's start here. Ms. Scott?
I have a couple questions. What specifically happened to the first RFP?
So during the period after we received the approval to move forward, the vendor, there was some discussion with the vendor regarding their DBE goal, and subsequently the vendor made some business changes, and they subsequently rescinded their bid because of some of the business changes that they made.
They rescinded their bid because they were unable to meet the DBE goal?
That wasn't how they explained it, but I can't say for certain, but their explanation to us was that they made some business changes as far as staffing and resources that they employ.
Excuse me, Sean, wasn't there an issue raised by them that they were concerned about their ability to hire sufficient staff to provide this services for this contract? Was that one of the issues that they raised?
Yes, sir. That was one of the issues, is that they specifically mentioned their internal staffing. They didn't go into as much about the DBE.
And who specifically, which company was that?
Signal Point Solutions.
And the Yancey Power, their goal at 18%, where are they now?
They made a commitment for 24%.
So where are they now?
As far as the goal,
What's their percentage at this time?
the
We don't
Yeah,
have a contract yet.
Right, but I'm curious if you still know where they are with the DBE at this time.
They haven't
As
begun
a
doing any
company.
work for us yet, so they don't have a history with us of meeting a goal around that, but they have, as shown, the 24.4, I believe, was the percentage.
Right, but we can know as a company where they are at this time, period.
So,
Maybe
Ms.
we
Scott,
can
if I
find
may-
out.
If I may, Ms. Scott, what we'll do is to monitor the performance once they get awarded the contract and as it is being performed, to ensure that the company that they say will be doing the preventive maintenance is in fact doing 24% of the contract work.
Right, because their business modifications and their business as it stands with Dun and Bradstreet would identify where they are with the DBE at this time, what their percent is without the contract at MARTA. if they're a 10% company at this time and they have a goal of 18 and a commitment of 24, but right now they're 5, does that make sense, what I'm asking?
It's not really what they, as a company, because I think they're actually utilizing a DBE sub to perform this work.
Okay.
So that's not being measured, or that's not a measurement.
So
that's
they
used.
intend to use a company to meet the goal.
Correct.
And one more question, I'm sorry. What does the acronym NFPA stand for?
National Fire Protection Agency it basically provides guidelines for different types of fire protection equipment.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Pond?
Ms. Scott, ask my question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none, may I get we got a motion. Let us go ahead and vote, please.
Can you please activate my voting worthy?
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Please count me as the affirmative.
You'll get to vote for the next meeting. You're on probation for this one.
And the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of MARTA Police Department uniforms and equipment, IFB B452528. Mr. Scott Cryer, AGM, Chief of Police and Emergency Management. Mr. Cryer.
Good morning, Chairman Wortham, Vice
Chief
Chair
Cryer.
Abdul Salam, members of the committee, Mr. Parker, Mr. Collie Greenwood. It's finally good to see you in person. Been the chief for over a year now, so finally we're here together, and it's good to see some faces. I'm here this morning to talk about a request for approval of a contract for the MARTA Police Department's uniforms and equipment. The contract B452528. Next slide, please. So a little history on where we are. The current contract is with Galls, and it expired back in December of 2020. And we're on an extension of that contract, and it expires in September of this year. The original contract was proposed to Ops and Safety back last fall for a little over $2.5 million. Mr. Parker asked us to go back to the drawing board and see if we could get more competition for the bids, and also try to reduce some of the costs that we were looking at in the original bids. So we went back and separated this contract into 2 groups. We did the uniforms in one group and the equipment in another group to see if we could solicit more participation. We had about a little over 37 vendors express interest originally, but again, we only had 2 companies that submitted bids. Next slide, please. Those 2 companies were Galls and Centos. Centos was deemed not responsible for a couple of reasons. One, they could not provide a majority of the equipment that's required by the MARTA Police Department. And 2, their uniforms, although they have a very large uniform presence around the country, they are not specific to police uniforms. So a lot of their uniforms were not deemed police type uniforms that we wear every day. Galls was deemed responsible for both categories, and they are our current vendor. They're very well received around the country, not only in Georgia, but all across the nation here. They also have a very large freestanding store here close by, so that makes uniform repairs and exchanges very easy for the officers. Next slide, please. So the original bid for uniforms came in from both companies very close at $1.3 million. However, Centos's equipment bid was very low due to the obvious reasons that they couldn't provide most of the equipment. Galls came in at $336,000, and they were able to provide all the equipment that MARTA needed. So the original cost last year was a little over $2.5 million. We reduced that cost by over $800,000 by getting a bid from Galls for the 3 years and a 1-year option at a little over $1.6 million. So Ms. Nash and her team set a DBE goal of 6% for this contract, and Galls has met that 6%. Next slide, please. So to summarize, we split it up into two categories to try to get more participation and reduce cost. Centos was deemed not responsible, whereas Galls was. We reduced this original cost by over $800,000. We've met our DBE goal. So I'm respectfully requesting authorization to enter this contract with Galls for uniforms and equipment for the total amount of $1,696,663.17.
Ms. Hartage, I move to approve.
Pond, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and second. Is there any questions from the committee? Mr. Durrett?
Scott, are the services that they would be providing tomorrow the same services that they have been providing yesterday?
Yes, sir.
And we've knocked $800,000 to get the same thing?
Yes, sir. So what I did is I looked back at the history of our uniform issuing, and it seemed like we were giving a lot more uniforms and equipment out than we probably should have. For instance, when I got here, I ended up with like 10 shirts and 10 pairs of pants and 3 boots, and I was like, don't need all that. So we really looked at it and said, what is really needed each year for the officers to look good and to be safe and to have a good uniform. So that's where we got a lot of the savings.
Well, we call that demand management in the transportation field, don't we?
Any further questions or comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Tomlinson? Turn your mic on. It's on, I can't hear him. There you go.
I'll try to speak up.
Morning.
I just want to make sure I understand, was the RFP or the contract split in two? Like, could a company bid on just one part?
Yes.
And even with that, only 2 bids total, and they both submitted for both parts?
Correct.
I just would have thought like maybe in the uniform side there would be more people. More people want to be honest.
Yes.
Mr. Farson?
Yeah, when I look at all the officers in uniforms, how many different varieties of uniforms do we have?
Quite a few.
There is quite a few.
That's part of the problem with
Yeah.
the bids. So as you know, we have K-9 officers that wear a certain uniform. We have protective specialists at the front desk that wear a special uniform. We have our SWAT officers that wear a uniform. We have our everyday line officers that wear a uniform. We have a ceremonial honor guard that wears a very sharp, well-dressed uniform. So there's a variety of different uniforms and requirements of those uniforms. And that's why it's difficult for the smaller companies to be able to bid on those things.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? I have a request.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief Cryer, would you, for the benefit of the board, would you tell us again what some of the primary differences were that Centos could not offer? I remember you talking about position for the gun and for the various pieces of equipment.
So a great example that I can give you right now is a shirt. So this shirt looks like a normal shirt with buttons on the front. In actuality, behind these buttons is a zipper. And this zipper behind the buttons is a safety feature. So you put this shirt on, and when somebody's in a tussle with a suspect, you can't hold on to this shirt. Whereas a normal shirt that has buttons, you can put your fingers in there and grab onto a shirt and jerk them around. So that's just one safety feature of a police shirt that Centos could not provide.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Seeing no other questions, so we'll go ahead and vote, please. Who'd I miss? I'm sorry. And the motion carries. Thank you so much, Chief Cryer.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a technical training briefing. Mr. Eric Peterson, Manager, Technical Training for Bus, Rail, Track, and Infrastructure Craft Training. Mr. Peterson.
And thank you, Vice Chair. Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. Greenwood, and other members of the committee. My name is Eric Peterson. I'm the Manager of Technical Training. I've been in technical work for about 30 years. I have 30 years of experience in transit, with 16 years in Los Angeles, 8 years in Washington, D.C., and then now I've been here about 5 years. Okay, next slide. Okay, today I will be presenting Technical Training Branch, our mission, our team, our training during COVID, and how we communicate with our client groups. Okay, next slide. Okay, how technical training fits in with MARTA's priorities. Not only have we updated and significantly added to our customer service instruction during bus operations and rail operator training, but we've also added a significant customer service portion to our customer-facing maintainers training. Additionally, we see ourselves as an internal service provider and strive to provide excellent customer service to our internal MARTA client groups. We feel that when we are doing our jobs right, the MARTA brand is bound to shine just a little bit brighter. Next slide, please. Okay, technical training. Our core role within the agency is to provide excellent craft job skills to operations employees. These employees represent MARTA's frontline team, and so we understand that a lot is riding on our team doing our jobs right to produce a good team in the front line. Next slide. Okay. The technical training group is simply structured. It's chief to manager, manager to senior instructor to instructors. We have a single administrator whose impressive work you'll be seeing in later slides. Our senior instructors are the backbone of our team, providing direction and support to our extensive instructor staff. Each of our senior instructors is an expert in their area. Each of them having served in the frontline capacity for many years prior to becoming an instructor and subsequently a senior instructor. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, as you can see from this slide, technical training team comes with years and years of experience. These MARTA craft instructors have done the work. They've been railcar mechanics, track inspectors, track repairers, equipment operators. As you can also see, many were frontline supervisors. And this is a very logical progression for a craft instructor, from frontline employee to supervisor to technical training instructor. And again, as you can see, there's a whole lot of experience rolled up into our training group. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this slide represents some of technical training's major accomplishments. Bus operator candidate training was shortened from 14 weeks to 8 weeks. This was primarily done, and I want to emphasize this was primarily done to improve instructor to student ratios. So our goal was not to shorten the training. The goal was to improve the ratios during behind the wheel training. By shortening the training time, we were able to double the candidates' drive time in front of instructors. Additional things that we did was that we started pulling best practices from FedEx and UPS for learning routes. That was one of the difficulties that we were facing. There are a large number of permutations coming out of any one garage for routes. I think Laredo is like 272 permutations of the routes. And so we initially were going to teach them how to do each route. We thought that we would move it forward to, after 272 was too many to teach somebody during a training period. And so we moved it forward to stealing some of UPS's and FedEx's learning techniques. Also, this change inadvertently resulted in a typical annual labor cost savings of more than $1 million a year. Okay, during the same period, MARTA's bus operator collision incident rate has continued to drop. Prior to COVID, there was a decrease of bus incidents equal to 28%. And during COVID, the number of incidents continues to decline. But the operating environment has changed, and so these statistics were not used to inform this committee. One of the pieces of work that our team is very proud of is the audit of best wayside practices. This was performed using APTA, FTA, California, and NTSB wayside training standards to inform our own instruction. During this audit, we assembled a list of best practices found within these different standards, and then checked our own internal processes to ensure that we had those same practices within our training. Those practices that were not found in our training were then subsequently added to our training so that we would be more robust. The technical training team has also produced training policy, which guides our team, and has developed standardized training contract language, which has been forwarded for use within MARTA's contract templates. Most recently being used in the procurement of our new rail car. It was the starting point for the language for the Stadler CQ 400 vehicle contract. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, certification and recertification training. Our transportation instructors spend nearly 60% of their time in front of groups of students certifying and recertifying them based on performance criteria and knowledge retention. Pictured is one of our bus operator instructors demonstrating how we position a bus prior to making a right turn. The certification and recertification process involves all of our operators, whether it be bus, rail, light rail, locomotive, or track equipment. And it also applies to those employees and contractors who are accessing the wayside. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, technical training has a very robust craft training curriculum. Our core mechanical and electromechanical courses for our bus and rail technicians are each about 6 months in duration. As a way of understanding just how much our instructors know about the equipment, just think about a subject that you feel you know a lot about, and then think about what would be involved to expound upon it for 6 months, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And that should give you an idea of the amount of information that each of these instructors has. Okay, next slide. Apprenticeships. The one major outlier to our 6-month model is the bus maintenance apprenticeship program. This is a 2-year program that takes candidates who have demonstrated aptitude from someone who has knowledge or practical, knowledge or practical experience all the way to bus technician. During this training, the technical bus maintenance instructors cover all of the systems of the bus: electrical, air, brake, suspension, steering, engines, transmission, driveline, HVAC maintenance, and body systems. This is an area where we are looking to possibly improve the program by partnering with a local community college who will teach the fundamentals skills portion of this coursework, which would allow the MARTA instructors to concentrate more fully on the MARTA-specific characteristics of our fleets and respective maintenance programs. Okay, next one. Okay, during the pandemic, MARTA's technical training team was day on, stay on. During that time, we continued forward and maintained all of our internal client training rigors. So we see we did a significant amount of training during this COVID period. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is our weekly report. So if you're wondering, this slide was not meant to be read. Take an eagle eye to read this. This is our weekly training report, one of the ways in which we communicate what we are doing to our client groups. I just wanted to show a complete document rather than a single page so that the volume of training could also be communicated. This report lists each student by class and reports on the progress within the training. The report goes out to each of our client group's directors, to safety, and to human resources. Next slide. In addition to the weekly report, we have a bi-weekly report that goes out to the same audience described above and also to the technical training team. This document is more like a newsletter, and it provides our team with the opportunity to celebrate our victories, accomplishments, and wins. Internally, it also provides a light way to communicate what's happening within our branch. Okay, next slide. This is our monthly report. Again, this is another slide that is not meant to be read. In addition to our weekly and bi-weekly reports, we have a monthly report, which has its concentration in the aggregation of hours, instructor hours and student hours. This report is useful because it allows technical training to monitor the utilization of each instructor. How much time they spend in front of students, the utilization rate, and how many students are typically in their class, the return on investment. This makes sure that we're getting the maximum bang for our buck, for our MARTA buck. What we want is to have technical training instructors in front of our employees for the maximum amount of time possible with the best ratios. And then next slide, please. This is a blow-up of the monthly report. And in this slide, what you can see is that along the horizontal axis, what we're doing is that we are aggregating cumulative instructor hours and cumulative student hours for the fiscal year. We use these totals to inform our client groups of how much of the time their employees are spending in class training so that they can adequately resource their own groups. And then along the vertical axis, it's we aggregate cumulative hours by what the class is, what the type of class it is. And so, again, this allows us to see where we're concentrating our training at. And then next slide. Then this is again a blow up of the monthly report, and by this we track each of our instructors, and this tracks their student hours, and we try to have them with a goal of about 5,880 student hours per fiscal year. And by doing that, we're able to map to what we want to do as far as getting curriculum out to our client groups. So it allows us to know that we're getting the amount of hours, student hours out there in front of our clients so that our MARTA staff is being trained. Okay, so next slide, yep. In summary, technical training is MARTA's craft training provider. And when we are doing our jobs correctly, we're able to lift MARTA's employees just a little bit higher. So next slide. I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present this briefing on technical training branch, and I defer back to Chairman Worthy. Or I guess I'm deferring back to Vice Chair Abdul Salam. I'm not
That's
sure
okay.
who I'm deferring back to. But.
I'll be him for today.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Scott?
I promise I only have one. And this question is for Mr. Greenwood. Mr. Greenwood, when I look at slide 10 regarding apprenticeships, is this an opportunity for the Fulton Technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We are reviewing everything that MARTA's involved with, along with some of my peers on the technology board, to start to look for opportunities to lend ourselves to that very venture. So everything's on the table, and we've already started some internal discussions about what else MARTA can do.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, sir, Mr. Durrett.
Forgive me for this question, but candidates for bus operators, do they have to have their commercial driver's license before they can even apply?
No, they don't.
So they can earn the CDL while going through the program?
So, yeah, we have two tracks. And so we allow somebody with a permit and a passenger endorsement to apply and successfully get the job. And then the deal is the very first thing that will happen is that they'll go to Georgia Piedmont where they receive CDL training and get their CDL. Then they come into our regular track where they go through the bus operator program.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Further questions? No action required on this item today, but Mr. Peterson, excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Board.
And the last item on our agenda for today is other matters. Of course, you'll see that the FY21 May performance indicators are informational. You can read those at your leisure. Yeah. And we do have a request from Mr. Ash for comment. Mr. Ash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, I'll shoehorn it into operations and safety because it falls into the safety category. I asked Mr. Parker for an update on MARTA employee vaccination rates and whether this is a point at which we're going to revisit whether our current approach to that topic is adequate given recent developments.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I know Luz has some of the statistics, but we are actively doing things to encourage people to get vaccinated. We're having a a conversation around, what is legal that we could do. We actually had a good conversation yesterday at the C-Team meeting around how the governor's limits that he's placed on some government entities around some of the aspects of it. And, we're sort of having a internal conversation, and we can bring this back to the board about, what some other entities are doing, including the President of the United States considering not necessarily mandating vaccinations, but having a combination of those, those individuals who aren't vaccinated having to have some regular testing. We're kind of talking through that right now and seeing how that both applies to Georgia state law and how we could internally manage that as well. So it's an ongoing conversation. But in terms of the percentages, Lou, sorry to put you on the spot, but I know the last I saw, we're slightly ahead of the jurisdictions, the counties. Is that right? I'll turn it over to you, Luz.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Mr. Parker. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. We are currently a little bit above 42%, which is in slightly above our region, and very much in par with most agencies comparable to ours. We are working very much in partnership with not only our own health insurance providers to make sure that they continue to emphasize the vaccination process, but as you know, we just finished a partnership that we developed with some CVS and the Urban League to do on-site vaccination clinics. We offer those for 3 days, both at our Laredo garage as well as West End and Five Points stations. And we also held a 1-day on-site here at the headquarters vaccination program that resulted altogether in 160 employees being newly vaccinated.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, anything else?
Yeah, I don't want to at all kind of shine the sneaker. It's quite frankly disappointing, both at MARTA and I think across the country, that it just seems like the group of people who are unvaccinated are largely remaining unvaccinated, and I think that the conversation that we had at our staff meeting yesterday was really about what we can do and how we can do some additional things to make that more of a requirement and potentially get it to the point of making a requirement. But I think there's a few steps to go along the way. So,
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Understand the legal challenges versus, say, private industry, but I do think that, and I know you guys are working on this, but I do think that you can culturally put a lot of pressure on people from the top down that this is what's expected. You have your labor contracts, and I understand there's some issues there, but at the end of the day, 6 months from now, when someone's up for a performance review and they're not a team player and not participating, you just make it very uncomfortable while you can for people that don't get on board. And second, and that's one thought. So
yeah.
I know, let's just go back to wearing masks on buses and trains. It was a year ago that we weren't requiring that, and we were concerned about the legal parts of that. And you really made that a real emphasis. If you want to get on a bus or a train, you wear a mask, and that was very successful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that approach worked. I don't know if that approach will work for this, but just two thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Pond. Mr. Parker, you have something else? You have your lights?
No, I'm more than happy to maintain some more questions.
Ms. Hardage?
It's just a comment, and I know it's being looked at in other entities and other parts of the country, but insurance premiums can be adjusted to where you can reward those that have been vaccinated at a different premium rate than those that haven't. And I encourage you to do anything like that, because people that have gone out of their way to try to remain healthy should not be paying the same premiums as those that haven't. And that's just my opinion, but I feel very strongly about it.
Thank you, Ms. Hardage. Mr. Ash?
I appreciate it, the efforts that we're going through so far. I would also like to understand what other incentives we have offered. This doesn't need to happen in real time, because this is going to be a continuing conversation. But I'll tell you that I'm not satisfied with 42%. So whatever it is that we have done to date, it needs to change. It needs to get more aggressive, if that's the right word for this. I'd like to understand, and maybe it needs to come to me, maybe it needs to come to the whole board. However, I'd like to understand the perceived legal obstacles to requiring vaccination amongst subclasses of employees.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, as a board member, if I were asked whether I would vote to require vaccination as a condition of employment, my vote would be yes.
Yeah, a couple of things. We have had, starting with sort of minor things, we have had some incentives in terms of raffles to get people to be vaccinated. We have made a decision that we are going to implement a requirement for new hires. Are we still legally comfortable with that? To require new hires to be vaccinated as a first step. And then in the conversation that we had yesterday, Liz is going to engage in, an outside counsel looking towards what's obviously legal here at MARTA and in the state of Georgia, and also look at, I think there's some things that other municipalities around the country are doing around, a balance between testing, increased, regular testing of unvaccinated employees and, vaccinations. And then, I think I just think at some point we get to the point where there's a requirement, but I think that, that's going to happen across the country, I suspect. I wouldn't be surprised if the FTA, pushes us in that direction as well.
And I look, I'm respectful of and understanding of bona fide religious objections and/or medical objections to it. I have one of my 3 children can't tolerate the pertussis vaccine. So, I have one child who hopefully won't get whooping cough ever, but we'll see. That said, I would like we are at an inflection point in this disease in this region. Mm-hmm. And we need to figure out how to do better, whether it's just the customer-facing employees, whether it is new hires, whether we need to incentivize it along the lines of what Ms. Hardage and Mr. Pond suggested, and incentivize it so much that it is a de facto obligation, or whether we're going to take up a vote to push the issue even harder.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, respectfully, I do not want to keep talking about this month after month. I would like for us to get to a decision and get there quickly.
Luz?
So we shared your disappointment about our vaccination rates, and we have made, as you know, significant efforts to both educate as well as respond to the questions of those individuals who are somewhat reluctant to getting vaccinated. So that has been our focus. We have also made every effort to make vaccination very accessible to all of our employees, and have focused on that, and will continue to do that. We right now considering a couple of additional partnerships for vaccination on site. And we also are continuing to offer the incentive that Mr. Parker referenced We will maintain that all the way through the month of August. But as you mentioned, these measures have had, while they have had some level of positive vaccination rate, they haven't advanced us to the level we wished to be. So as soon as our legal counsel give us complete green light on the implementation of the new policies, we'll be moving forward with that with all due urgency.
Thank you, Luz.
I have one question.
Can I offer that at the next work session, that we can come back with a, you know, a briefing, sort of comprehensive about where we're working to get to, completely in line what we're hearing from the board, you know, not just you, Mr. Ash, but I think I'm hearing a very consistent message that quite frankly, you know, the leadership team at MARTA shares that concern with you. And we'll, you know, we'll lay out how we get from a number that is quite frankly, you know, bothersome to where we as an employer should be and where we wish the society was, but unfortunately isn't. But we've got some, we recognize that we've got to take some very deliberate actions that are going to be controversial with some of our employees to get a healthier environment for our employees, for our riders, and for the families of our employees.
Thank you. Ms. Scott?
Out of curiosity, is there a lower percent of vaccinated employees among those that are in the represented community of MARTA?
Yes, unfortunately, the operations groups are the ones that have the lowest percentage of vaccination, yes.
So is there any thought to maybe partnering with organized labor, the ATU, to talk about bringing those employees together to see how we could affect the vaccination rate?
While we have had this conversation with them in an informal way, we haven't had a formal discussion about how they could partner with us, but it's certainly something I will take on to, and bring about at our next labor relations meeting.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Yes, sir.
This is really directed towards Liz, but I want it discussed. One of the things the literature is saying, in addition to Ms. Harder's points about premiums, and it was briefly mentioned here, but I do want it, you know, thought about a little bit more, and that's the mandatory testing of unvaccinated. If you do PCP tests once a week among the unvaccinated, people are going to get tired of that going up your nose. It's pretty terrible. So it's a pretty good incentive. So I think that is past legal muster in other industries. So I certainly think we want to look at that. That would probably be an administrative nightmare to test our whole unvaccinated group once a week, but that could be kind of a step in the right direction to urge people to get that shot.
So, Mr. Worthy, that's exactly where we're looking at framing a policy with that as a first step for doing the regular testing for the unvaccinated. And exactly what you said, that motivation is that weekly test is not pleasant, so.
Yeah, I do feel a little bit encouraged. In the news yesterday, the local channels talked about how the vaccination rate has actually gone up here in Georgia in the last 3 or 4 days. And so I operate on the principle of people do better when they know better. So I think if we could maybe step up our education campaign, not just for staff and employees, but also for the general public that are riding our services, I think that could make a difference as well. I like the idea of the weekly testing. I know some other corporations and companies are doing that for the unvaccinated. But it is a matter of information. You know, we're in an information war, and so you got to fight that with information, and I believe. Mr. Asher had something else?
Yeah, and I promise this is my last comment for the time being on this topic. Just so you all know, I mean, our law firm employs about 70 people. We spent 2 months, 3 months with voluntary vaccination. We offered $100 gift cards for people who got vaccinated. We then offered 2 days of paid time off for people to get vaccinated, so they didn't have to worry about side effects. They didn't have to worry about whether it was an inconvenience for them to go get vaccinated. And then that got us to about 90% compliance, and the rest of the 10% was solved by requiring it. Now, we don't have a labor contract, so I mean, it's a different comparison. But just so you know that my money is where my mouth is, we are now at 100% compliance, and those last few holdouts, they made the decision and told us, I don't want to do it, but I will if you make me.
Okay.
And that's how we got there.
Okay. I think that's about everything on this issue for today. We need to move on to the next committee. Thank you
Madam
all
Chair?
for the input. I'm
Madam
sorry,
Chair, I do have
Mr.
one
Pond, I
question
didn't see you.
on the other matters.
Yes,
And
sir.
it's for colleague Greenwood. I was looking at the performance indicators, and the system is doing really well with the exception of one area, and that's mobility, on-time performance. And it was a very rapid decline in performance in the last 3 or 4 months. I was just curious as to what's going on and what's being done, so.
Sure. Initially, that problem was exacerbated by a technology issue with our tablets. So we changed providers, we had to re-engage the tablets, and there were some technical issues that had to be worked through. I'm happy to say about 4 or 5 weeks ago, those technology issues have been resolved, and the tablets are no longer forming any kind of a problem. We are now, however, in the midst of a workforce issue with one of our contractors. So we've met with that contractor. We've done a few things like taking the formal, about 25% of their formal ridership work away from them and transferring it to the other contractor, which was kind of the thinking behind our having multiple contractors out there. So they've agreed to relinquishing up to 25% of their work so that can be smooth. And they've also committed to, they've already hired more recruiting staff and committed to 6 weeks from now being up to full speed. But they are almost 50% short on their workforce, and that's something that a lot of industry is facing right now. I am happy to say that the target is a 90% on-time performance, and over the last few months, as you've noted, it's been fluctuating. Last week we achieved 90% and a bit more, and we're looking forward to steadily increasing beyond that point. We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've identified what the problem is. We've got a fix in place, and it's a short matter of time before we return.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we're going to go ahead and close out the meeting for operations and safety. Do we want to take a short break? Let's take a short break, and we'll come back with Business Management Committee. Thank you all.
Thank you. No, we can totally fire them.
Your breeze cards is in there, man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Yeah, I said, yeah, they got our phone actually when he accepted it. Okay, but I had I'm hoping to get some back from them today. I know I'll resend it and I'll see some. So that way it comes back. So cute.
And I'm talking to them about doing that as a state. We should be supportive of what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
Our biggest industry is going to get going to inherit.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I learned, some of the biggest hotels, employees are represented by SCIU. And I need to find out what they're doing, because I can find that.
Check. It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And, I mean, and we're gonna end up in a place where our economic.
Check.
Well, when school starts,
Oh, it's gonna be a mess. It's gonna be a mess. Hello, Mr. Thompson.
Doing pretty good, how are you?
Back when we're back. Brian, it's good to see you. Doing all right? Glad to see someone else in there. That's exactly right.
I have to find my summer suit.
I mean, it's been so long since I've had to wear a suit. It's, you know, I have the top half of my suit, which, you know, I call the lawyer mullet. I've been able to do that for a year and a half. Yeah, you got a different set of restrictions.
Could you go ahead and register for the meeting? I'd like to get the Business Management Committee meeting started.
Neither one of them got sick. My public, you know, I'm not, and I'm convinced that if I get a breakthrough infection, I'm concerned about my 11-year-old, my 8-year-old, my 3-year-old, and my immune compromised mother. This shit is being real.
Okay, I'd like to call this Business Management Committee meeting to order. Could you go ahead and register your presence? Yeah. Yeah, you won't. Who was, okay.
Everybody needs to re-sign it. Please sign it again, please, yes.
Okay. Mhm. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, good. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Nine are present. Thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the June 24th, 2021 Business Management Committee meeting minutes. Can I get approval?
This is Hartage. I move to approve.
Second, Roberta.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Are there any discussion? Hearing none, can we vote on the minutes? You're going to do Ms. Scott, thank you. Thank you. The meeting minutes have been approved. The first item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of cyber threat intelligence platform services, IFB B48474. Dean Malice, AGM Information Security. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Be in public again. Again, my name is Dean Malice. I am the AGM of Information Security. Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Vice Chair Durrett, members of the Business Management Committee, and Mr. Parker. I'm pleased to be before you today to request recommendation to the full board for the approval of the resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of cyber threat platform services, IFB B48474. So this is a renewal of something we already have. We're going into a 3-year contract on May 5th, 2021. Notice to bidders was sent to 6 vendors for the procurement of this service. Notice of the invitation for bid was advertised in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Georgia Procurement Registry, the Georgia Local Government Access Marketplace, and on MARTA's website. 83 firms retrieved the online solicitation and will purchase the CD. On the bid opening day of June 7th at 2 p.m., 1 bid was received. 1 bid was received after the deadline and returned unopened. This is a fixed unit price contract for a term of 3 years. SHI International Corporation submitted a single bid in the amount of $502,396 and was determined to be responsible and responsive. The Department of Internal Audit has conducted a price analysis and determined that it was fair and reasonable in the pricing. Of the numbers that reached out for this service, 6 of those were platform rooms, 28 were unable to perform the work provided, 6 were too busy, and 41 didn't respond to 2 requests for the survey. So this is a specialized service. It's not many people resell this service. Like I said, we've been using it for a year. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read through these really, but I mean, this cyber threat intelligence, it's a real-time actionable, so that's the key there. It's real-time. These vendor is constantly scouring the web and the dark web, looking through open source intelligence, human intelligence, and again, deep and dark web. It's kind of the same view that the hackers have, that they're doing on a daily basis. I don't know if I've mentioned to you all, but hackers, it's a business. They get up in the morning, and they work their 8-10 hours, and they go home, and they're doing these type of things. So this vendor does that as well. Next slide, please. So it's a team of cybersecurity analysts that, again, scan the internet for these actionable threats. It frees up my resources to do other things because they don't have to do this. And they can work on other matters. We get automatically generated and vetted and prioritized and actionable cyber threat reports and intelligence. Next slide, please. So like I said, this team notifies MARTA when they find something on the dark web. So a lot of times there's data dumps. There's hacks of, let's say, LinkedIn. And sometimes people will use their MARTA email addresses. A lot of times they're using the same password. Unfortunately, we don't know that, but that's just human habit. So when we get those alerts, we then do a forced password reset so that the hackers can't attack that. And we've seen recently on an older data dump where we got a lot of attempts into our network using those credentials, but fortunately it was past the span of we do a 90-day on a password reset, forced reset, so we were fortunate in that. But it gives us kind of that intelligence of in that real time. This also feeds into our log aggregator, the one that the board approved last month, or was it this month? Doesn't matter. That data goes in there, and we get more actionable items off of that. We get the indicators of compromise is what they call, so we can start looking through our network for items like that. It's a holistic type of service. It complements the services that we're putting in place. It's a layered defense that intelligence really helps us to kind of proactively protect the authority. Next slide. And that concludes my little briefing there. And at this time, I respectfully request that the Business Management Committee recommend to the full board award of the contract for the procurement of cyber threat intelligence platform services, IFB B48474.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Are there any discussions from the board concerning this resolution?
Mr. Chair, I have
Questions,
one
Mr. Pound?
question. Not sure this, anyway, let me just throw this out, thinking out loud. When you have 83 people retrieve this and a number, so many people gave it a look, I don't know how many of those were qualified. I'm a little surprised you got one bidder, and that's not to say this is not the right group, but I'm just wondering, sometimes are these RFPs too onerous for businesses, and they're saying, I'm not going to spend $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 to chase this size contract. Just a thought, that's more of a contract and a procurement question.
Yeah, I do know, Mr. Pond, you know, it is a specialized service. It's not, everybody does not resell this. So there's specific vendors that can. But to your point, I don't know why we only had, you know, we had 2, 1 came in late. And like I said, there was 6 that were too busy to review. And when we went to the 41 others with 2 attempts, there was no response on why they didn't bid.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Holland. I'm the Director of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials. So when we post the bids on MARTA's website, anyone is able to download them. And we find that in many cases, we have folks downloading them numerous times. We have plan rooms that may download and allow other folks to pull those bids. So for example, in this case, we did have 83 folks downloading them, but anyone is able to come onto the website and just download, and that's what we have. But we do have a survey at the end of every procurement, reaching out to see why did you not submit a bid even though you downloaded. Okay.
Just the purpose of that comment was that I sometimes find with large agencies, they treat small procurements, the criteria the same as large procurements, and I think people like Kristen Tomlinson could vouch for this, but are the requirements the same if it was a $20 million contract versus a $500,000 comment? I'm not sure you need to address that. It's relevant for this decision. I'm just putting that out for future thinking, so.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hardridge, you have a comment? Question?
No, my comment was more around the fact that we had a great presentation last week at the Audit Committee on all the work that's going on right now with cybersecurity and all the problems that we're having. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. So if you're comfortable with this, I just wanted to say this kind of just expounds on what we just heard last week for those of us that were at that meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tomlin.
The one that came in late, was it a known or recognized entity?
But whenever a bid comes in late, you can't accept it, so you don't open it and
Iron is not awesome, but someone who is relying on the real-time and their real information missed the deadline. I only ask that in this case, and I do recognize this with Cisco, exactly late bids, but I just know from a procurement standpoint, especially when we're going into a single bid from a competition standpoint, we have to look at it and end up with like one bid or maybe submission. But
okay. So because it was an IFB, invitation for bids, it had to be publicly open, it had to come in and be stamped and so forth. We cannot, even if it's 1 minute late, we cannot open it.
like I said, I mean, can't turn it in on time. We're relying on entities with critical real-time information. I mean, that's not good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Just one comment, that is, The individuals that do this type of work, that work on the web and look in these dark spaces, I mean, they're critical because that's where these things happen that leads to access to our information and our databases, particularly across the email conversations that we're having. It's critical that we close these doors, these opportunities. So much is going on now with a breach of our security. So I think this is a valuable opportunity to do just that, get control over that. Okay. No other comments?
Right here.
Yes. Ms. Abdul-Salam.
I was looking through the information. You gave a lot of numbers and what have you at the top of your presentation and reviewing. I'm just curious as to why there's a 0% DBE goal for this. Is it because there's only one responsible bid, or is that?
I'll let Ms. Nash speak to that.
Good morning. The reason that there is there's a 0% DBE goal really goes to the specialized nature of this particular software. So it's actually software.
Yeah, it's a
and
service, really, that this vendor provides, and they've got software, and we get feeds in from them as well. So there's some manual process, and there's some automated process of it.
So there isn't secondary work for, or subcontractor work for actual DBE to do. The reseller of the software would need to be a DBE in order for us to have a goal on there. And we weren't able to locate DBEs for this specialized types of software.
Okay, thank you. Now, hearing no other comments or questions, I call the motion, the resolution to vote. Okay, the motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of the renewal of maintenance support for the Cisco SmartNet devices, IFB B47511. Mr. Kirk Talbert, AGM Technology, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Frierson, Mr. Durrett, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath, and members of the Business Management Committee. If you can advance to the next slide, please. This is a request to this committee to approve an award of contract to NetSync Network Solutions in the amount of $436,602.72 for a one-year maintenance and support contract on all of the networking equipment and software and services that we procure from Cisco. This is the company that provides the routers that connect us to the internet, that connect us to our payroll systems, that connect the CCTV cameras and everything else through the network. We're in a capital program right now to replace the majority of this equipment, which is why we're seeking a one-year term. Ordinarily, we would seek a 3-year term for this type of maintenance and support. We went through an invitation for bid, and NetSync Network Solutions was the lowest responsible bidder at this price.
Move for approval.
Hardy seconds.
Questions by the board members? Discussions? Hearing none, then I call the question. Okay. All right, the motion carries. All right, next item on the agenda is also a resolution authorizing a single source renewal of the maintenance and support for the Oracle database ERP and the ID management licenses, RFP P27978. Mr. Kirk Talbot, you have the floor again.
Thank you very much, everyone. Next slide, please. This is a request to extend our existing contract with Oracle. Oracle is the company that provides our payroll system, our core general ledger accounting system. It also provides our human resources system of record, and a fair number of other ancillary systems that are all tied into our enterprise resource management system. If you can, next slide, please. What we're asking for is an extension on this contract. It is currently set to expire October 31st of this year. We've been utilizing the Oracle software since December 2nd of 2012 when we entered into a competitive contract for that. This request is an extension for 3 years, and you can see the financials in front of you. It's a total of $7.2 million coming out of our operating budget, and it breaks down to about $2.4 million per year to run this software. This gives us maintenance support, critical patching, licensing, and everything to keep the software up to date and operational for the agency.
All right, any other questions? Can I get a motion?
I'll move approval of the resolution to send this to the board.
Okay. Okay, it's been approved in second. Any discussion? Question, Mr. Pond?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Kirk, I recognize these software companies, once they get their hooks in you, they've kind of got you to some extent, but I'm just wondering, this has been going on for 9 years now. We're extending it for another 3. Could we have gone out on the street a year ago, or is there even a second provider?
So, multiple layers to that question. Thank you. There are no other providers for the Oracle software. Once you've selected Oracle as your ERP system, you're connected with Oracle. There are other providers of ERP software, SAP, Microsoft, whatnot. And there are providers of ancillary systems. So, for example, we're constantly evaluating what is the best software to run specific business function. For example, employee performance management and training used to be on Oracle, and we divested of that capability and we've moved over to Saba. So we're constantly evaluating what is the best provider, and it's not a monolithic choice, right? It's not all Oracle or nothing. So every year we're evaluating what's the right piece, and this represents those business components that we anticipate, general ledger, that we will continue to operate on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Certainly.
All right. Mr. Doer, do you have a comment? Okay. Any other comments by the board members? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. I call the question. Can we vote? The resolution has passed. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate it very much. The next item on the agenda is a briefing, contracts and procurement and materials. Jacqueline Holland, Director of Contracts and Procurement and Materials. You have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Frierson, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath, and other members of the Business Management Committee. My name is Jacqueline Holland, and I am the Director of the Office of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to brief the Business Management Committee on the Office of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials. Next slide. This briefing will guide you with an overview of the Office of CPM. I will provide you information on the contracts team. I will explain the difference with our authority-wide contracts and the contract spend. I'll share with you the differences between formal and informal procurement. We'll talk a little bit about procurement planning, and I'll share with you the purchasing team, the materials team, what we're currently doing with GSA and state contracts, as well as changes to our business processes and how we have automated those business processes. Next slide. The Office of Contracts, Procurement, and Materials, also known as CPM, is the central procurement arm of the authority and is responsible for procurement from the project inception through administration and closeout. CPM is responsible for contract development, procurement, and related administrative functions in accordance with federal and state requirements. We're also responsible for maintaining the integrity of the procurement process. We maintain the threshold levels of the Board of Directors and management approvals, also known as the delegation of authority. We manage the authority's inventory of parts and consumables. We report to the Office of, or I should say, I'm sorry, the Department of Chief Counsel. CPM has direct oversight of 3 branches. That's contracts, purchasing, and materials. Next slide. There are 3 areas within the contracts team. There's business support, operations, capital programs, or construction and A&E. The business support team is managed by Nicholas Waters. The team is primarily responsible for authority-wide professional service contracts. Their internal customers include the Office of the General Manager, Human Resources, Information Technology, MARTA Police, the Office of the Chief Counsel, Finance, Transit-Oriented Development, and External Affairs. The business support team administers approximately 251 contracts with a value of in excess of $2.1 billion. The operations team is managed by Jacqueline Bentley. Their internal customers include rail maintenance, maintenance of way, bus operations and bus maintenance, bus transportation, and facilities. The operations team administers approximately 101 contracts with a value of spend of $175 million. The construction and A&E team is managed by Dewana Haran. Their internal customers include capital programs and delivery, planning and infrastructure, systems and electrical engineering, and architecture. The construction and A&E team administers approximately 64 contracts with a contract value of approximately $1.4 billion. Next slide. CPM currently administers approximately 400 contracts with a value of over $3.6 billion. This excludes real estate and intergovernmental agreements. There are approximately 113 contracts that we utilize capital funds in the amount of approximately $2.4 billion. Operating funds, we have about 231 contracts with a spend of about $1 billion. Planning funds, we have 27 contracts with a spend of $174 million. We also have 14 revenue-generating contracts. Those funds coming into the authority is about $35 million. There are 12 contracts that are no cost, no compensation. And then we have 5 contracts that we call other areas, or for example, pension energy saving, which is Cisco and bond counsel, and that is approximately $42 million in contract spend. Next slide. So the contracts team is responsible for soliciting formal and informal procurements. Formal procurements are requests of $200,000 or above, and they require the Board of Directors' approval. Examples of formal procurements are requests for proposals, requests for expressions of interest, invitation for bids, letters of agreement, sole source, single source, state and GSA contracts. Any of those that are over $200,000 must come to the board for approval. Next slide. Informal procurements are requests that are under $200,000. They do not require the Board of Directors' approval. Examples of those informal procurements are requests for quotes, small or what we call micro purchases, which are under $10,000. Also letters of agreements, single source, state and GSA contracts under $200,000. Next slide. Procurement planning. We often are asked, why does it take so long for procurements to be processed through MARTA? And this probably happens in a lot of places, but procurement planning is necessary in order to identify requirements and solicit and receive goods and services timely. The procurement schedule would vary based on the type of procurement and the complexity of the procurement. For example, a request for proposal requires that we come before this board and request permission to solicit. Because of the complexity of most requests for proposals or RFPs, CPM will allow at least 45 days street time. RFPs are evaluated by a source evaluation committee. The evaluation process sometimes includes presentations, interviews, best and final offers from the proponents, and then we have to come back to the board to get approval for award. This process sometimes could take up to 6 months, or it may take a little longer. The request for expressions of interest is used to select architectural and engineering firms. CPM has to follow the Brooks Act, which is a federal law that establishes the procurement process by which we select architectural and engineering firms. The board of directors is briefed on the solicitation. We usually allow 45 days on the street. The evaluation also includes a source evaluation committee, and they may also have presentations, interviews, and we have negotiations. The selected firms are then presented to the board of directors for the award. Another formal procurement is the invitation for bid. We need ample time, so we usually say about 30 days on the street. The award is based on the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. All bids are awarded after the board of directors has approved the award. A request for quotation, that's an informal solicitation. We sometimes have 2 to 3 weeks street time. The award is also based on lowest responsive and responsible quoter. That will not come to the board for the award, and depending on the delegation of authority, it may have to go to Mr. Parker for his signature. Next slide. The purchasing team is managed by Roger Mahler. They are responsible for stock and non-stock purchases. The purchasing team utilizes an inventory management system to procure stock items. They are responsible for replenishing stock for all 6 of our storerooms. The purchasing team is also responsible for procuring non-stock, one-time small purchases of up to $10,000 and informal quotes of less than $200,000. Next slide. The materials team is managed by Roderick Lyle. They are responsible for receiving goods and issuing parts from MARTA's storerooms. The materials team, actually on a monthly basis, they move approximately 17,000 transactions. So they're moving things from the storerooms whenever our operations or rail ops or bus ops need items, they move those many transactions on a monthly basis. They are called material controllers, and their majority of them are, or all of them are, our represented employees. The 6 storerooms are Hamilton, Browns Mill, Laredo, Perry, Avondale, and Armour Yard. Next slide. CPM, along with legal services, have changed how we utilize GSA and statewide contracts. We've heard the concerns from the board of directors regarding those types of contracts, so therefore we now have limited the use, and we will come before you for every request for a GSA or state contract no sooner than 30 days before the request to award. We have collaborated with our requesters to utilize a competitive bidding process and consolidated the authority-wide GCPS contract, which is the General Consultant Professional Service Contracts. We had previously 31 GSA contractors. We have now reduced them to 8 contracting firms by utilizing the RFP process. That process now has reduced the 5-year spend of those consultants from approximately $83 million down to $43 million. Next slide. We've also continued working with legal services as our partner, and we report to legal services. But we're working with the capital programs and delivery department. We've updated our work order procedures. We've created an ease of processing work orders by allowing multi-year work orders. Some responsibilities were moved from CPM to our project managers to allow the project managers more autonomy on their projects. Some examples of those changes are directive change requests on construction contracts. PMs are now responsible for substantial completion documents of their construction contracts. They're also responsible for issuing out site notice to proceed. We have also provided them access in Oracle to utilize a means of looking up purchase order information. They're also able to review the balances and funding information on their projects. Next slide. We have been working with IT and finance, and we introduced the encumbrance process last year. Encumbrance reserves the requester's funds when the requisition is created, and it obligates the funds when the purchase orders and payments are completed. CPM is currently collaborating again with IT to go live with a new contract management system. We were hoping it would be July 1st. We've made some changes that would be better serving the authority in our requesting department, so it looks like it would be more of a September go-live date. This system will give faster access to contract information. It will give us easier access to reports on contracts and purchase orders. It's going to reduce our manual process in our CMP department or office, and it will also send out notifications to our internal and external customers regarding their contract deliverables. For example, if a contract is about to expire, everyone who's involved in that contract will be notified. If insurance certificates are going to, looking to expire, those are some examples. Next slide. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will now turn this back to Mr. Frierson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion? Oh, no, this is a brief. This is just a briefing, so we won't have to vote on this. Any question or comments by the board? Mr. Pond.
I have a comment. I think that was a great change, moving once you have a contract in place to turn over those responsibilities to the project manager.
Yes.
I think that's a huge change for getting the work done without going back and forth.
Yeah.
I've seen other large public agencies move in this direction and it made a big difference. So that's very significant and a great change, I think.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mrs. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Dewey.
Ms. Holland, excellent presentation. I don't know if you remember, but maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, Mr. Edmonds and myself and some others were asking about how, as board members, we could find out what contracts are in what state, where they are in progress, and how much work they're giving to their subs if they're doing DBE. Do you all have something like that the board can make available, that you can make available to the board?
I believe we can, working with Ms. Nash's office. We have a system now, B2G, that has all of that type of information. I'll have Paula speak to that, but we do send, whenever we have a request for like a bid, an RFP, or quote, or whatever, we do send all that information to Paula Nash's office, and we work together collaboratively to make sure folks are submitting what they need to submit. But as far as the documents, it resides in diversity and inclusion. I'll have.
Yes, ma'am. We have a system. It's a software system called B2G Now, and we put all the contracts in that system, and it does, as well as the DBE subs in that system, and it connects to Oracle, so it does allow us to be able to tell payments that have been made to the prime, then the prime goes into the system and puts their payments to the subs within that system. Then the subs, which are the DBEs, would actually acknowledge, yes, we have that payment, or no, we didn't get the payment, this is how much we actually got, as opposed to what the prime does. And through that system is how we keep up with the percentages of the DBE goal achievement, whether or not it's being met.
I mean, and speaking for myself, I don't know about other board members, so many contracts pass before us, and sometimes, you know, late night and wonder, whatever happened to, and so I think that if that's a system that's in place, I think that that's excellent if, you know, we can kind of make available that to board members if they need to try to catch up with what's going on with the project.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much, Mrs. Holland. The other items on the agenda are some other matters. There's a FY 2020-21 May financial highlights and financial performance indicators. That's in your packet. Please, if you get an opportunity to review that, it will show some trend information concerning year-to-date financial performances for May, and for the month of May, you'll see that we're tracking favorable in terms of our revenue, and it seems like we are managing our cost against our budget, so that's great numbers to be looking at. And then also there's a summary in there, utilization of the GSA and the state contracts. There's a letter in there that addresses recommendation to the board concerning our relationship in terms of those contracts that we're doing with GSA. All right, is there any other information I need to cover? Hearing none, then I consider this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.